Good evening. This is the premiere of Smash the State, which we hope will be a weekly television series of commentary and political satire. Part of this show is serious, and part of this show is fun. We plan to observe current events and offer serious analysis. We have a point of view, and we intend to be provocative. At the same time, we will employ the time-honored tools of parody and ridicule. Our target is the government, and the leeches and parasites who use the government for their own ends. This program is about those who cannot mind their own business and those who cannot keep their cotton-picking hands off of what does not belong to them. We come to bury Caesar, not to praise him. Question authority, power to the people, smash the state. Fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be a bumpy night. Thank you. Live from Austin, it's Saturday night. This is Smash the State. Welcome to our show. Thank you for watching us here on Austin Cablevision every Saturday night at 7 o'clock. Of course, what else would you be watching at this time of night? Now that C-SPAN 2 goes off the air at 7 p.m., there's nothing else on. I've just been notified that a Dallas Cowboys football player has stubbed his toe. We'll have complete details on this story later in this program. You know, Governor Ann Richards recently made a speech in which she talked about how young women should not be looking for Prince Charming riding in on a Honda. Say, isn't this ironic considering that the nation's #1 Prince Charming with a beer belly and a wandering eye is a certain former governor of Arkansas? Of course, that Prince Charming did not drive a Honda. He drove a pickup truck with AstroTurf in the back. I see that our own Senator Phil Gramm is running for president. He was in Iowa recently, there for the Iowa caucuses, and they had a state convention there, and they had a straw poll to see the support of the various candidates for president, and Phil Gramm came in behind Lamar Alexander. Lamar Alexander, hey Phil, I've got some advice for you. Don't give up your day job. And finally, I see that Governor Ann Richards has named Austin to be the capital for a day. Well, stay tuned. We've got a great show for you. Don't go away. We'll be right back. Well, as you may have noticed, the latest fad in crime control is curfews. Now, there is right and there is wrong. Curfews are not right. Curfews are wrong. The curfew says that you are basically guilty until proven innocent. A curfew punishes people for just being out on the street. And this is not what this country is supposed to be all about. Curfews, in effect, hold people under house arrest in their own homes for no reason. And this is something that is happening all over the country. Here in Austin, we've seen the curfew grow like a cancer. First, it is now that it's just teenagers under 17, and this has not been extended to other ages yet. At first, it was just late at night, but you'll notice that this keeps getting extended. Now it's during the daytime hours, during school. At first, it was just downtown. And then it was the black and Mexican American neighborhoods. And now it is citywide. This is something that is growing. It's getting bigger. And we have to ask ourselves, where is this headed? What is next? Where are we going with all this? I believe that this is not the end of this, that this is not the conclusion, that we're going to be seeing more and more curfews like this. The apologists for curfews are never satisfied. There's not some view that, well, this is what we want, and now that we've got this, we don't want any more. It is a situation where they keep wanting additional measures, and this is really just incrementalism. If you want to know where this is headed, I think you should ask yourself, what is the worst possible thing that could happen if we follow this trend on curfews? What is the worst possible thing? Murphy's Law says that anything that can go wrong will go wrong. Well, let me tell you Gary's Law. Anything that the government can do, the government will do. And the government grabs power gradually and slowly. It doesn't just take it immediately. If you want to know how bad things can be with curfews, just take a look at, say, Nazi Germany, where people always had to have their proper documentation, and where these Nazi soldiers would stop people on the street and ask them, "Are your papers in order, sir?" Or take a look at South Africa under apartheid, where you had to carry around a domestic passport, just identifying yourself in order to go from one part of the country to another. Not to go from one country to another, but one part of the same country to another. Governor Ann Richards, the Democrat who's running for re-election, publicly advocates a statewide curfew. Not just in some parts of the city, not just in the cities, but she advocates that the entire state of Texas have a statewide curfew. Her Republican opponent, George W. Bush, says he prefers local control. But otherwise, he is all for a curfew too. He just thinks that we should have every city pass its own little curfew, but he would be happy if the entire state of Texas were under a curfew as well. So we have to keep asking ourselves, where is this going? What is this headed toward? What is the final conclusion? And I think that we're heading in the wrong direction. Now, the City Council recently passed this curfew, and they put in a sunset provision saying that they will review it in 18 months, and at that time they will decide whether or not to continue it. And some people say, well, that makes it acceptable. It's kind of a trial period. Well, let me tell you, don't be fooled by that. That's just a trick. Because you have to ask yourself, do you really think that the City Council will admit that it made a mistake? Do you really think the City Council will look back at that decision and reverse it and apologize for it? Of course not. They're never going to admit that that was a mistake. Instead, what will happen is that as these reviews of the curfew come along, the City Council will say it's a success. In fact, we've already been told it is a success. In the areas where we have a curfew, the curfew has already been proclaimed a big success. You can be sure that what will happen is that the propaganda machine of the city and the police department will simply cite the statistics that support what they want to say, and they will conveniently ignore the rest. And I guarantee you that the curfew will be proclaimed a success by the government. It will be a success in their eyes. So this sunset provision, this idea of it being reviewed from time to time, this is meaningless. The price of liberty is eternal vigilance. We have to be on guard for these gradual encroachments of our freedom. We are not going to lose our liberty all at once by somebody coming in and taking our freedoms, our rights, the liberties that we take for granted in one fell swoop. They're going to take our rights away from us gradually, bit by bit, slowly, one little piece at a time. As a matter of fact, what you will see is that it's going to be like the old adage of boiling a frog in water. You know how to boil a frog in water. You don't put a frog in boiling water. You put a frog in a pot of water, and then you heat it up gradually. And then, by the time the water is boiling, the frog is not realizing it because he's acclimating himself to that hotter and hotter water. And finally, you can boil a frog that way. Well, that's what's happening to us with the curfew. That's what's happening to us with so many other things. You can take a look at so many examples in history. For example, the federal income tax started out with just affecting a few people. Most people were exempt from the federal income tax. The rates were very, very low. And anybody who said, oh, this is going to lead towards something terrible and everybody's going to be paying high taxes was just dismissed and laughed out. Well, in fact, what happens is what we have today. Well, you could not have had the income tax that we have today if you had imposed today's income tax at first. You have to impose it very slowly and gradually, incrementally. And that's what's being done right now with a curfew. It is a practice of divide and conquer. First, you target the teenagers. It's just the teenagers, so everybody else doesn't care. And first you just target Southeast Austin, so the rest of the city doesn't care. And then when it works, quote unquote, in Southeast Austin, you can expand it citywide, and you can say, but it worked in Southeast Austin. In fact, they wanted us to do it. They asked us to do it, and it was so wonderful. Let me tell you, I live in Southeast Austin. I did not ask for a curfew, and nobody asked me for my opinion on this. And if you think that the curfew today that we have now is only for teenagers, I ask you to think again, because the curfew is not just for teenagers anymore. In order to enforce the curfew, the police have to know whether or not you are a teenager. So the police can ask you for identification to prove your age. So in effect, they can stop anybody, regardless of age, to find out what their age is and whether they are obeying the law by being out on the street. It's just like when you go to a 7-Eleven to buy a six-pack of beer. You might be carded, even though you're obviously not a teenager, because they're just trying to play it safe. The thing that bothers me the most about the curfew is not just that we have it here, but that this is a national trend. We are seeing curfews all over the country. The Fourth Amendment to the Constitution is supposed to protect us from unreasonable searches. The Fourth Amendment is supposed to require probable cause, that is, a reason to believe a crime has been committed before the police can stop you, before the police can search you. But in fact, what has happened is that earlier this year, the United States Supreme Court handed down a decision. And that decision said that curfews were all right under certain circumstances. And as a result of that decision, we have been seeing a torrent of curfews. It's like the floodgates have opened up, and we're seeing curfews all over the country. The Supreme Court handed down a decision that said, well, the curfew is all right with a few loopholes. So if you put in those loopholes, you can have a curfew. And that's exactly what we're seeing here. Because of this decision, because, in my opinion, the Supreme Court failed to live up to its responsibility to protect the people from the government, lived up to its responsibility to preserve the Bill of Rights, to preserve the original intent of the Constitution, we are seeing a torrent of curfews all over the country, including here in Austin, Texas. We are seeing a situation where people are presumed innocent until proven guilty. You have to prove that you have a right to walk down the street now. This is something that in many ways people are saying, well, the curfew is justified because we've got to do something about crime. Well, I think you can have two different policies toward government. One is, you've got to do something. We've got to do something. And the other is, first, do no harm. And I prefer the first, do no harm adage. That's the Hippocratic oath that all doctors take. You don't go in and start performing surgery on a patient before you are sure that you won't do more harm than good. In fact, you don't want to do any harm at all. I think that should be our attitude with crime and with curfews. We should say to ourselves, first, do no harm. Let's not make things worse. And what is happening with the curfew now is that it is making things worse. It is allowing the government to have more control over our lives. In fact, I have to say that there are too many coincidences going on with a lot of things around the country that are not just curfews, but they're all things that seem to be leading us toward more and more control over our lives. For example, now there are proposals that we all would have to carry national ID cards. Now this is supposedly to deal with illegal aliens. I don't think it'll do any good in dealing with illegal aliens, but that is what we are told. So we're all going to have to carry our own little ID card. We had the recent decision from the same Supreme Court that gave us the let's have a green light on curfews decision. They also gave a decision earlier this year that said it was all right to have roadblocks on the highways to stop people for sobriety tests, so that you could be stopped for no reason to see if you were not a drunk driver. Not because you were driving erratically, not because there was some reason to believe that you were drunk, not because there was some probable cause as spelled out in the Fourth Amendment, but that you could just have checkpoints and sobriety stops along the highway just because they wanted to stop you. You see as well this crime hysteria. That is, you have a situation where really the statistics show that crime is going down. But the media and the government are whipping us up into hysteria. They're saying we've got to do something about crime. It's an emergency. It's a crisis. So therefore, let's do something about crime right now. And let's have curfews. And let's have roadblocks. And let's forget about all those protections that our founding fathers fought so hard for. And let's just have more of this because it's for your own good. And then you have the new money, where it will be easier to trace who uses what currency, and you have all the hysteria for gun control. You know, and the thing about gun control is you have to ask yourself, why doesn't the government want us to have guns? Why doesn't the government trust us? Now, I don't think that we are in a police state in this country. I think this is still basically a free nation, and I'm glad to be here. But I must say that we are moving in the wrong direction. As I said before, you have to ask yourself, where is this going? Where is all this curfew stuff going? You know, once you get something like the curfew started, in one part of town, it was just in downtown at first, but once you get it started, once you get the camel's nose in the tent, the precedent is set, and it can grow and grow and grow. Here, the curfew was just in one part of town. Here, it was just a nighttime curfew. Now it's a nighttime and daytime curfew. Now it's citywide. We are moving in the wrong direction. We are moving away from a free society and toward a police state. I'm not saying that we're in a police state, don't get me wrong, but we are certainly moving in that direction toward a police state. We're certainly not moving in the direction away from a police state and toward a free society, and it's important to recognize that we are not standing still. That is, things are not just staying the way they are. There are moves to take away our freedom. We are losing our liberty. It is being taken away from us gradually, and it is something that we should be on alert for. You know, the price of liberty is eternal vigilance. It is not enough just to slow down this erosion of liberty. That is, it's not enough to say that, let's say that the city council comes along and says that the curfew should not just be for those younger than 17, it should be those younger than 21. It's not enough for us to say, oh no, we can't go any farther, or let's take a closer look at this, or let's study this, or let's go slow on this. It's not enough to slow down the erosion of our liberty. All right? It's also not enough to just stop where we are and preserve what we have. It's not enough for us to say, okay, we let them get away with the curfew, and we're letting them get away with roadblocks for stopping people to see if they're sober, or the gun control, or all the rest. It's not enough for us to say, okay, we'll let you get away with this, you can stop, but you can't go any farther. That's not enough either. We have to demand a rollback of these insults to our freedom. We have to demand that the curfew be repealed. Not 18 months from now. We have to demand that the curfew be repealed now. We have to demand that we, the people, be listened, because clearly most of the people, according to the public hearings, were against the curfew. but the city council was determined to have it, and they weren't going to listen to us at all. Well, we cannot stand for this. The government works for us, not the other way around. And we cannot be satisfied with just saying, well, we'll just be on guard next time this happens, or we won't let this get any worse. We have to demand that the curfew be rolled back. We have to demand that the curfew be repealed. We have to tell the mayor, Bruce Todd, and the city council that they have made a mistake, and that we're not going to let them evaluate this a year from now or evaluate this 18 months from now and then say it's a success. And we're not going to let them evaluate it either. Let them say, well, according to our figures, it's a success. That is not good enough. We have to tell them that we don't want this and that we want this repealed. Crime is a serious problem, and we need to deal with crime. But we should not let the politicians and the bureaucrats use crime as a pretext for taking away our liberty. And now we're going to go to our next segment. We'll be right back. Once upon a time, there was an evil tax collector in a place called Texas. His name was John. John the tax collector took other people's money, money that did not belong to him. Why did the poor people in the place called Texas give their money to John the tax collector? Because he had many helpers, a gang. He and his henchmen made threats against the people. Some of the henchmen carried big guns. The tax collector's gang said to the people, if you give us a little of what is yours, they did not say that. They said, if you don't give us a little of what is yours, we will take a lot of what is yours, or maybe everything you own. And if we feel like it, we may kidnap you and hold you hostage. Sometimes John and his band carried out their threats against the poor people of the place called Texas. John's gang closed up shops and stores, cafes and taverns. Every once in a while, a shopkeeper was taken away and locked in a dungeon. And John the tax collector made sure everyone knew who he was and what he did. Look, everybody, he announced, I am punishing the stingy people who will not give me some of their possessions. It is unfair that they can keep what belongs to them after you have paid tribute to me. So you see, I am doing this as a matter of fairness. And the press gave John lots and lots of free publicity. But John the tax collector was sad. The people hated him. So John and his friends, the ones he gave the stolen money to, tried to tell the people, we are doing this for your own good. We want what is best for you. Everyone benefits when we have your money. And the royal sycophants danced and sang the praises of John the tax collector, and so did the lobbyists, and especially so did the editorial writers and the columnists in the newspapers. But the people were not fooled, and they still hated John the tax collector, and he was very sad. But then he got a wonderful idea. He began to issue proclamations and announcements about how the money stolen from the people could be spent more efficiently. He conducted audits. He published reports. He made recommendations and proposals. I'm from the government, and I'm here to help you, John said with a straight face. Here are ways the government can save money. And this time, John the tax collector succeeded in fooling the people. And the people in the place called Texas forgot that he was just a thief. And they forgot about his threats and bullying. And they forgot that his henchmen were just a bunch of thugs. And so, John the tax collector tricked the poor people in the place called Texas, the very people that he and his gang looted and pillaged with impunity, into thinking that he was their friend and that he was on their side. And John the tax collector lived happily ever after. The moral of the story, boys and girls: a thief will lie to you and con you. Beware of tax collectors bearing gifts. Just because you and your money have been parted, it does not mean you have to be a fool. And that's our show for tonight. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you here next week on Austin Cablevision, live Saturday night at 7. And remember, the revolution will be televised. Good night, everybody. Austin Public Access Cable TV audiences are the greatest audiences in the world.